Hi, and welcome to another episode of Industry Celebrities. It's that Kimberly again. Really excited to be interviewing my friend Dottie Gandy. She's going to share with us what she's up to. She's always up to something, and she's up to something new. So she's going to share with us a little bit about that and why she always says, why not her? I'm really excited, and I know you will enjoy our little conversation as well as the advice she gives to her younger self. Thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate you. So my friend Dottie Gandy was nice enough to join me today, and I will be interviewing her and asking her a couple of questions today. My name is Kimberly Scott. I'm the host. And this is my guest,
Dottie Gandy. Yeah. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Kimberly.
Well, I appreciate you joining me. And tell the folks a little bit about yourself. Give them some background.
Well, I thought I was amused when one of your questions to begin with said, how did you get started in your career? My careers have spanned 5 decades. So I just need to say that as a disqualifier up front. But probably the earliest or first career that I was associated with was the National Association of Women Business Owners. In the 70s, a group of women and I were looking at how to get the word out about ourselves and the businesses we were running. And in the 70s, of course, the term networking didn't exist.
Wow.
Women in the 70s could not be members of the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club. The JCs offered to let us be honorary JCettes.
What's a JC?
It's a Junior Chamber of Commerce.
Wow.
And the JCettes were the wives. So we said that's not really our vision. So a group of women in our offices in Washington, D.C. sat down in the back room for weeks and weeks to say, how do we support each other? And we came up with the term, we're going to be the Association of Women Business Owners. And I guess because it was the 70s and we were in Washington, D.C., we had been invited to the White House within the year, and all of a sudden overnight it felt like we were the National Association of Women Business Owners. And that organization still exists this day globally to support women who want to be entrepreneurs or business owners.
And you're a co-founder of that organization. That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Some people say that just makes me old. But
no.
I'm proud.
I would call you a trailblazer.
Thank you. I like that term a lot better. Yes. And I've had a variety of careers since then, but that was really the opening. So once you get visibility as a woman business owner, it's much easier to find your way into other industries.
Oh, absolutely.
So, for example, I moved back to Texas.
So where are you from?
Oh, I grew up in Waco, Texas.
Okay, got it.
Graduated from Baylor, had a summer job in Washington, D.C., and left D.C. 28 years later to move back to Texas to remarry, but I married and raised a family in Washington, D.C.
Wow. While you were trailblazing for
we were
women business
busy
owners.
Trailblazing for women.
Awesome.
Had 2 or 3 or 4 careers there, and
that's
then
amazing.
Started over in a career when I came back to Texas.
And what did you start over with when you came back to Texas?
Well, this little book that Stephen Covey wrote called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was gaining so much popularity that the Covey Leadership Center, it was called at the time before they merged and became Franklin Covey, they were looking at where to put their first regional office. So I, of course,
held
wrote
your hand
a
up
note to anybody that could listen. There was no social media or anything.
And there was no email, right?
No,
you had to write a letter.
I called the 800 number that used to be in the back of the book, and I said, hi, I'm in Texas, and I would just love for you to open your office here. And anyway, about a dozen applicants came out to interview, and I got the nod. So had the pleasure of opening Stephen Covey's first regional office. So served as a speaker, a consultant, a trainer with that organization, both as an employee and later as a consultant for almost 17 years.
Wow. Is that what led you to writing your book?
My first book was written just as I decided to be a contractor with Covey rather than employee. What I noticed when I was doing the required performance reviews for my staff in Texas, my daughter was working for us, and I honestly could not see a reason to give her a performance review because I basically thought she was perfect, and yet I didn't know how to avoid that requirement. So I remember when I called Kelly into the office, I don't know why, but what blurted out of my mouth was, Kelly, would it be okay if every day for 30 days I told you something different I liked about you? And Kelly was like, well, sure. Well, the sobering learning from that is about 7 or 8 days into that, I had used up all the obvious things that we might notice about somebody, but I promised her 30. So I started paying very close attention to her and started, how did she learn that? Where did she? So anyway, I got through the 30 days and Kelly's performance went off the charts. So then I did what I call the 30-day process with other people, anybody that would listen. And that became my first book. Simon & Schuster published 30 Days to a Happy Employee.
That's awesome.
Which came out in the early 90s. And the whole premise was people who feel valued for their work will outperform those who do not.
Absolutely. And in some of the things that I read about you, someone had told you that a first-time author could not get.
Oh yes,
a publisher. What was that about?
I had a wonderful agent here in town, and he was doing his best to coach this first-time author. And he said, we can send your book manuscript off to any publisher you want. And I said, well, send it to Simon & Schuster because they published Covey's 7 Habits book. He did. We could send it to anybody. And then he very politely and kindly said to me, now it could be several months before we hear back. And don't be surprised if rejection letters is what we get, but I'm going to work very hard. 6 weeks after we mailed those off, he got a phone call from Simon & Schuster that said we're going to publish Dottie's first book.
That's awesome.
Yes.
So you weren't discouraged at all. You're like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're going to just do it anyways.
Yeah, well, I've never been afraid to just do it. I mean, heck, if you can start up a national association for women in the 70s, writing a book for the first time didn't seem that hard. And then
I would agree.
Yeah, and because of my continued passion for women in business, I had the pleasure, as you know, of co-authoring a book with Marcia Clark, not the one who prosecuted OJ.
No. Don't ask those questions when we go to questions.
Marcia Clark, based here in the Dallas area, who is a global consultant and is just completing the 20th year of her Power of Self program for women. So we wrote this book that said, choose the role our choices play in shaping how our lives turn out.
Wow. That's awesome.
And that's my book career. Don't think I have another book in me, but that was
You never know. You never know. I think you have a lot of wisdom and stories to tell. That
boy, if you live this long, you better have a lot of wisdom.
Well, you do, because in the things that you've shared with me and how you reflect, you always have thinking back, you always, when you tell that story, I do, it clicks to me when anybody says it. Thinking back, I should have, or I'm happy that Well,
I think the success for any person, but especially women like you and me, is we need to surrender the notion that our life plan for ourselves is the way it will go. I mean, that's just a joke. And you know very well that I was at the peak of my career as a speaker and a consultant when my husband was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and that meant that airline travel was no longer available. So screech, put on the brakes. Overnight, I became a full-time caregiver for almost 6 years for a husband with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And so
you did it so gracefully, and
I was glad the cameras were not there in the early days, perhaps, but I learned to be.
Yeah.
I learned that caregiving for the non-professional could also be a calling, and that experience shifted who I was in ways I could never have otherwise imagined. So Tom passed away almost 2 years ago, and so as you know, because you've been a big help, I've been looking at what's next for me, and I've eliminated all of the corporate stuff. I do want to continue being a very powerful speaker and a voice, but that's it. I want to do, my new title for myself is I am a transformative speaker. I want to transform how people think about things, particularly those things that may be holding you back.
Yeah. When I read that, I thought that was awesome, because I feel that if my mom and now my father, when they retired, quote unquote, if they had shifted into something that both of them would not be in this kind of space of, well, my mom with dementia and my dad he doesn't want to do anything, and if more people at the age of 50 or 60 or whatever it is, when either they retire or they want to change to something else, if they can transform, if they have somebody like you to help them.
Well, and the new term now, of course, is we don't retire, we rewire.
Yeah.
And particularly there's a lot of baby boomers who are aging out, and they're not done yet.
No.
They're like, now I'm going to go do what I've always wanted to do, or maybe that book that was in me, I'll go write it now. So I think it's very exciting.
Absolutely.
Although when my parents retired, they were both blue collar workers, and a rocking chair looked pretty good to them.
Yeah.
And so they just kind of vegetated. But nowadays,
we're living longer.
Yeah, we can't give ourselves the luxury of saying, because I've completed this job, I'm now done. And we also know statistically that financially, many of the boomers are not able to retire. So I'm saying, well, in that case, go out and do what turns you on and lights you up.
Yeah, absolutely. And your motto of saying yes to life and why not you, I think is awesome.
Well, I think you and I've talked, in fact, I think you helped inspire this, but the business of when the Alzheimer's caregiver role found me, and I was saying, why me? Why this? Why now?
Yeah.
And the only answer I got was, why not?
Yeah.
And it turned out to be one of the greatest gifts in that it required me to hit the pause button. I think one of the phrases I used was, I'm one of these people, I'm a go-getter. I always believe that everybody should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And with Tom, when he was diagnosed, I realized I was married to someone who no longer had bootstraps.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge shift. And you're on that path right now.
Yeah.
And you know what we're.
Yeah, it definitely, the shift was a good shift. It was a
very powerful shift.
It helps you with your own awareness of things. For me, it helped me become, I was already on the path of becoming self-aware, but it definitely amplified it. And I feel like it amplified my empathy towards not just my mom and her situation, but everybody else's situations in life.
Absolutely.
And patience, and just knowing that she's not going to be around forever anymore. Nobody is. And I had already started feeling that way.
But it used to be we didn't always know what our cause of death was, unless it was old age or whatever. But now if you have a dementia or an Alzheimer's diagnosis, the loved ones, the family, they know what that person is going to die from.
Yeah, absolutely. And just knowing that we all live longer, I feel like definitely helped me go, okay, this is what I need to be doing, and I'm good with this. It might not look like everybody else's, thought of what I should be doing, but I'm going to manage it. I'm going to figure it out because that's what she taught me to do.
Kimberly, one of the first things that I learned to love about you was that you don't see any stoppers in front of you either. I've never done that before, but guess what? I'll figure it out. BAFO, that means there's no limits to where you can go and what we do. And people look at me sometimes and say, well, most people, especially women your age, are retired.
Well,
And I'm like, I'm not ready to wear that cap.
yeah.
Power to those that are retired, but that's
You're not most people either.
No,
So.
none of us are.
No, yes. So what topics are you going to be speaking on?
Well, there are several topics. One is that was inspired by the Alzheimer's journey is a topic called Why Me, Why This, Why Now, Why Not? The other topic is called Choices That Make Good People Great, and that's based on some of the research that Marcia and I did for our book for women. And the other very favorite topic that I'm talking on is what does it really mean to be up to something?
I like
when
that.
people say, what's up?
Yeah.
We say, not much. That's just not true for most of us. And
Yeah.
about 20 years ago, a group of us came together in Dallas to support each other and what's up?
Yeah.
And to make a difference in whatever that answer was. And so our Up to Something group in Dallas has been together for 18 years. And
That's
people
awesome.
have gone on to do extraordinary things. So the other speaking topic is when somebody says, what's up? Please don't say not much, because I'll come and rewire you.
No. Yes, you will. I don't ever say not much. I usually probably say too much sometimes. So, but you're right. It just keeps you on that mindset, and it keeps you never know who that person knows. When you say it, that they might go, oh, I should connect you with something.
Divine coincidence.
Yes, absolutely. And, having someone like you to pollinate and connect people there are so many people out there that.
You use that interesting term, pollinate. Because I'm a Gemini, I've always described myself as, I'm a Gemini. We have the attention span of a gnat. And I was meeting with this guy one time, and I was sharing that with him, and he said, well, that's not a very empowering paradigm. And I said, no, but I said, I get interested in this, and then this, and then this. And he's the one who said, why don't you consider yourself a pollinator? You just go drop a little nectar here and a little. And then as we were leaving, he handed me his business card. He was retired. And on the back of it, it had his name, and underneath it said, pollinator.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
You definitely are a pollinator.
Well, you are too. So
I think we attract each other.
Yes.
So tell, there is something that I wanted to ask you about that I read in your bio that I thought was quite amazing. And it was about your proudest moment.
Oh, yes. Well, see, if you get to be a woman okay, I'll be 80 next year. But when you get to be a woman of a certain age, the year I went to Washington, D.C. was 1962, and I was working for a U.S. Senator from Texas. And on August the 28th, 1963, he said, I'm closing the office down. I'd like for you to go down to the Washington Mall and listen to the speaker. And that was the day that Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech.
Awesome. That gives me chills.
Me too, even today. And all I know was that as a young girl from Waco, Texas, I knew I was in the presence of something very powerful. And quite honestly, not only was I a women's rights advocate in Washington, D.C., I was a very active civil rights.
That's awesome.
Supporter.
I loved reading that. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to ask about this story.
I know. Okay, if my grandchildren are listening to this podcast, I'm going to apologize to you right now for saying this, but my big fear is that one day, and they're all college age, right?
Yeah.
And one day somebody's going to say, tell me about your grandmother. And they're going to say, she was there for one of those great speeches in history. It was either the Gettysburg Address or I don't know. Well, we all have our own relationship. So I say that with apologies to Alex, Colin, Mike, and Christina.
Yeah, they'll remember. Definitely.
Yeah, they'll definitely remember. I'll be hearing about this.
And it's recorded now, so document it forever. Live and in person. Yeah. So Industry Celebrities has a one standing question, and it is what advice would you give to your younger self?
Go big or go home. The thing that I shared with you earlier, when I was 16, my father, who had a 9th grade education, although my mother had a college education, it was very important to my father that his daughters succeed. And he said to me, so what do you think you want to do when you grow up? And I was so passionate about tap dancing that I blurted out, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be a tap dancer on Broadway.
Oh, that's awesome.
And my father, who could have and perhaps should have, said, are you crazy? You'll die on the streets of New York. How are you going to support your mom?
Yeah.
All my father said was, if you want to be a tap dancer on Broadway, you'll be the best one they ever had.
Aww.
And while it didn't sink in at the time, the question that you just asked, I can't tell you how many times when I've been out on a limb and saying, nobody's ever done this before, my this little voice says, shoot, if you can be a tap dancer on Broadway, you can sure take this next step.
Yeah.
So my go big or go home.
That's awesome.
That's available to all of us at any time, no exceptions.
That is awesome. I wanted to be a fly girl, which was in the 90s, Living Color. It was one of Jennifer Lopez's very first gigs. And my mom said, there's no money in that. You need to go to college. Okay. And so off to college I went. But anyways, because that's just the...
I went off to college too. Very grateful for my education at Baylor University.
Yeah.
And I still, when somebody says, what makes you think you can do this? I go back to them.
Yeah.
I can be a tap dancer
on
Broadway. I can sure try
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
Which I've shared with you. I see so much of that in
you.
So.
Well, my dad always used to tell me, you can do anything you want. Practice makes perfect. And if somebody says you can't, then you go prove to them that you can.
Yeah. And you're not proving that they're wrong.
Correct.
You're proving that you can.
Correct.
Very
absolutely.
big distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. It drives me when somebody says I can't. And it's more to prove to myself more now than it was when I was younger. When I was younger, it was about proving to my brothers that I can play basketball as good as them. Because,
well, see, those,
I was the youngest.
Who are my age remember the old Broadway musical about Annie Oakley when she sang that infamous song, I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say No.
Oh.
And I thought, that applies to me, not in the same context as Annie Oakley, but
yeah.
I don't know how to say no to an opportunity.
Yeah.
If I don't know how, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, you were definitely open to the first time being on the Caregiver Story, and I appreciate you for that. Oh, I really appreciate you do have that yes attitude, and I love it.
I'm honored, and I'll do anything that lets me hang out with you for a little bit.
Thank you, Dottie. I appreciate you. So tell the listeners, tell the folks how they can connect with you and get a hold of you if they're interested in hearing more. Oh, what's your...
Well, go to my LinkedIn account. It's LinkedIn /n.LinkedIn.com. And I am on Facebook. I've chosen not to set up a web page again. I'm going to use primarily LinkedIn.
And Facebook.
Facebook. Mm-hmm. If you will message me on Facebook, I will give you my phone number and my... email address, because I would love to be a speaker or a presenter for an organization where I feel like my message has relevance.
Awesome. And that is on LinkedIn, it's just Dottie Gandy, right?
Dottie Gandy. Okay, yes, thank you.
I mean, as long as they know how to search you, you'll come up. Yeah.
Thank
and if you do put in Dottie Gandy in just Google, your pictures come up. So I think that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
So FYI.
Thank you.
Make sure that if Dottie's advice, you feel someone needs to hear it, tag them in the comments, maybe share this episode with them, have them reach out to Dottie for sure. I really appreciate you all tuning in, and I appreciate you, Dottie, for joining me today.
My pleasure.
And remember, until next week, sharing is caring. Thanks, y'all.